ensure sustainable consumption and production patterns. This is the challenge posed by SDG 12, worldwide consumption and production, a driving force of the global economy, rest on the use of the natural environment and resources in a way that continues to have destructive impacts on the planet. Economic and social progress over the last century has been accompanied by environmental degradation that endangers the future of our development and even our own survival. The COVID-19 pandemic offers countries an opportunity to build recovery plans that will reverse current trends and change our consumption and production patterns towards a more sustainable future. We have the unique opportunity to build back better, instead of going back to habits and practices that have proved harmful to the planet and to us. Given this, what innovations are needed in order to make our production and consumption more sustainable? And how are we so far in trying to achieve this? Hello science fans, my name is Chona and I'm your resident Filipino scientist. Join us in today's episode where we talk about SDG 12, responsible consumption and production. There is 7.96 billion people in the world today. And if global population reaches 9.6 billion by 2050, we would need 3 whole planets to supply the natural resources needed to sustain our current lifestyles. These resources are vast and are dependent on the different ecosystems of the planet. And for this video, we will focus on water, energy, and food. Less than 3% of the world's water is fresh or drinkable, of which 2.5% is frozen in the Antarctica, Arctic, and glaciers. Which means we are dependent on 0.5% in order to fulfill all of our freshwater needs. Humankind is polluting water in rivers and lakes faster than nature can recycle and purify. More than 1 billion people globally still do not have access to fresh water, despite technological advances that have promoted energy efficiency gains. Energy use continues to increase by at least 35%, with commercial and residential energy use as the second most rapidly growing area of global energy use after transport. And speaking of transport, despite the consistent increase in fuel prices, there has actually been observed at least a 32% rise in vehicle ownership. And the amount of kilometers traveled by motor vehicles are expected to increase by at least 40%, and airplane travels by at least 3 times its current rate. And since the pandemic has kept a lot of us in our homes, it is interesting to note that households consume 29% of global energy and consequently contribute to 21% of resultant carbon dioxide emissions. And given all these, it is interesting to note that the share of renewable energy in final energy consumption has risen to 17.5% in 2015, and we are hoping that it will continue to rise. Each year, an estimated 1/3 of all food produced, which is equivalent to 1.3 billion tons, worth around $1 trillion, ends up rotting in the bins of consumers and retailers, or spoiling due to poor transportation and harvesting practices. Sadly, 38 million children under the age of 5 was found to be suffering from obesity or being overweight in 2019 due to the consumption of junk food and other types of unhealthy food. Even our food production has become unsustainable, with the food sector accounting for around 30% of the world's total energy consumption and for around 22% of total greenhouse gas emissions. Land degradation, declining soil fertility, unsustainable water use, overfishing, and marine environment degradation are all lessening the ability of our natural ecosystems to provide us with food. To help make our consumption and production practices more sustainable, SDG 12 has several key indicators. In this video, we will focus on how the Philippines has tried to address these challenges. The first challenge is to implement the 10-year framework of programs on sustainable consumption and production, all countries taking action, with developed countries taking the lead, taking into account the development and capabilities of developing countries. In the case of the Philippines, data from the Department of Environment and Natural Resources projects that our waste production will continue to increase from 21.4 million tons in 2020 to 23.6 million tons by 2025. With the expected increase in population and therefore number of consumers, waste generation is not likely to go down in the foreseeable future. And so it is critical for us to start adopting principles of circular economy here in the Philippines, especially on how our waste products can be used as resources in our production systems. Another challenge issued by SDG 12 is to achieve the sustainable management and efficient use of natural resources. One of the hottest debates in the Philippines is about the mining industry. Most of the country's metallic minerals, including gold, iron ore, lead, zinc, chromite, and copper, are drawn from mineral deposits found in the islands of Luzon and Mindanao. Smaller deposits of silver, nickel, mercury, molybdenum, cadmium, and manganese occur in several other locations. While the global demand for minerals for clean energy technologies are growing, mining for minerals remain restricted in the Philippines due to past environmental impacts, illegal operations, and mismanagement. Another focus of SDG 12 is to cut by half the global food waste at the retail and consumer levels, and reduce food losses along production and supply chains, including post-harvest losses. And according to WWF Philippines, an estimated 2,175 tons of food scraps are thrown out in the city of Manila alone every day. When the poorest of the poor are scrounging for recoverable food scraps in garbage bins, this level of waste is criminal. We must support innovations that reroute our food distribution networks to give access to those in need in a way that is equitable for all. Another aspect of SDG 12 is to achieve the environmentally sound management of chemicals in all wastes and significantly reduce the release to air, water, and soil in order to minimize their adverse impacts on human health and the environment. In the Philippines, we have Republic Act 6969, or the Toxic Substances and Hazardous and Nuclear Waste Control Act of 1990, which controls, supervises, and regulates activities involving toxic or hazardous waste. The challenges in the implementation of this Republic Act has been highlighted during the pandemic, with hundreds of used rapid test kits seen scattered in streets in various locations around the country, and masks and personal protective equipment in our beaches, rivers, and lakes. And the Department of Environment and Natural Resources is asking for everybody's help by following this simple color coding scheme, by placing hazardous wastes from your home in yellow bags or labeled containers to make sure that our garbage collectors will know how to handle them properly. SDG 12 also calls for the substantial reduction of waste generation through prevention, reduction, recycling, and reuse. Our current culture of overconsumption is driving the climate crisis. Yes, the crisis that is leading to terrifying super typhoons, species extinction, and even these scary heat waves that we're all experiencing. Today, resource extraction and processing are responsible for more than 90% of land and water-related environmental impacts, while almost half of the world's greenhouse emissions come from manufacturing consumer products. And so I hope we can reconsider our current shopping practices. Let's move towards a wiser shopping experience where we invest on products that have longer lifespans in order to increase our savings in the future, while at the same time preventing the production of unnecessary waste. SDG 12 also asks nations to encourage companies, especially large and transnational companies, to adopt sustainable practices and to integrate sustainability information into their reporting cycle. It is interesting to note that Ayala Land Incorporated, in the Sustainability Yearbook of 2018, was honored as one of the most sustainable companies in the world. To meet its goal, Ayala Land Incorporated is taking a three-pronged approach by dedicating 450 hectares of its land to carbon forests, along with efforts to implement passive cooling design in its developments and shift to renewable energy. But we are also seeing the movement towards more sustainable production in some of our smaller enterprises, such as with Bambike and Kawayan PH, where they make use of bamboo as alternatives to metal in some of the products that they create. We also see companies that reuse plastic waste in order to create reusable bags, and even in feminine hygiene products, where we are seeing a surge in the use of reusable cloth napkins and even menstruation cups. Related to this is the challenge of SDG 12 to promote public procurement practices that are sustainable in accordance with national policies and priorities. Funded by the European Union through SHE-ensya, our local leaders had a training on green procurement processes last 2013 to 2016. And this was facilitated through a 169.2 million peso project that hopes to improve local procurement processes in order to improve sustainable development. And finally, SDG 12 challenges all of us to ensure that people everywhere have the relevant information and awareness for sustainable development and lifestyles in harmony with nature. Education for sustainable development increases the awareness of our youth and the general public to our need to move towards more sustainable practices. It increases the number of minds that can help in creating innovative and creative solutions in order to solve our sustainability problems. And this is one of the reasons why I continue to make sustainability videos in order to reach more of the public so that we can think about how we can improve our current practices. But STEM can also help with sustainable production and consumption. With our diverse community of scientists and engineers, we are continuously creating practical innovations that lessen the cost and amount of resources needed to create some of our day-to-day materials, such as greener alternatives to paper, recycled clothing, or even waterproof packaging that can serve as alternatives to plastic. We are in constant consultation with managers and economists to figure out how to repurpose the waste produced in the country as resources for production facilities, such as to serve as biofuel for energy or even as alternative sources of biomolecules. Scientists are also trying to make food production more sustainable by trying to find cheap but clean ways to grow healthy and tasty meat in the lab, which lowers the amount of resources used up and the amount of greenhouse gases emitted by poultry, pork, and beef production that is being done all over the world. And with issues regarding the pandemic, alternative reusable materials are being developed to lessen the waste from single-use personal protective equipment without sacrificing the health and safety of the users. And so science has spoken, and science will continue to speak. And for us to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, we have to try and listen. But what do you think? What science innovations are needed to help achieve SDG 12? How can scientists and engineers collaborate with other sectors of society in order to improve our consumption and production processes? Please let us know your thoughts in the comment section below. And to keep updated with the latest videos from SHE-ensya, please follow us on Facebook and on Instagram. Follow me also on Instagram at shona.abeledo. Thank you so much for joining us in today's sustainability episode, and I hope to see you around!